I ultimately had an arrogant, freeloading man and his pack of cronies thrown out of my luxury hotel by the police. And it all started with a simple, but deeply suspicious, request at the front desk. For a few years, I worked as a front desk agent for a major luxury hotel chain. The particular hotel I was at was right near the downtown area. So we were a magnet for young, incredibly wealthy business types who loved to party. I usually pulled the second and third shifts, which meant I was the designated witness to all the late-night drama, drunken hookups, messy breakups, cheating scandals. You name it. But one incident stands out. A story I will never, ever forget. It began like any other night. I was at the desk when a group of young, sharply dressed men walked in. You could tell they'd been drinking, but they were still coordinated enough to walk straight and hold a conversation. One of them, let's call him Leo, approached my desk. He told me a story about how a woman at the bar had been hitting on him relentlessly. He claimed he'd told her no multiple times, but she just wouldn't back off. He said that he and his friends left, and it wasn't until they were in the Uber that he realized his room key was missing. He was convinced she'd taken it and was worried she might show up at his room. He asked me to deactivate his keys and to make sure that if she came to the hotel, I wouldn't let her in. But as he was telling me this, something felt off. He and his friends were all smirking, snickering to each other like it was some big inside joke. Leo then, without me even asking, launched into a detailed description of the woman. He described her height, her body shape, her hair color and style, and the exact dress she was wearing. The whole time, his voice was dripping with a nasty, mocking tone. At that moment, Leo made his request with a smug grin, completely unaware that this single, arrogant lie would lead directly to his own humiliating downfall. I told myself it could just be the alcohol. That maybe he found the situation ridiculous and wasn't taking it seriously. But my gut screamed that something wasn't right. Still, I had to follow protocol. I pulled up his reservation, deactivated the keys as he asked, and issued him a new set after he showed me his ID. I even offered to move him to a different room if it would make him feel safer. He and his buddies all had a good laugh at that before he declined, took the new keys, and headed up to their room. About an hour later, just as my relief for the night, let's call him Marcus, had arrived. The very woman Leo had described walked in. I was in the back office counting my cash drawer and hadn't had the chance to brief him on the situation yet. As I was walking out with my bag, ready to leave, I saw Marcus buzz the doors open. The woman rushed into the lobby, barefoot with her heels in her hand, and made a beeline for the elevators like she knew exactly where she was going. I hurried over to Marcus and quickly explained what Leo had told me earlier. He just looked at me, confused, and pointed to his monitor. He explained that when the woman, let's call her Clara, arrived, her keys didn't work. So he asked for her room number and last name. She provided both. And sure enough, her name was on the reservation. I leaned over to look. In the notes section, a woman's name was listed as a secondary guest, with Leo's consent for her to have access to the room. Now I was truly confused. To be safe, I called Leo's room to inform him that a woman matching his description was allowed up because her name was confirmed on the reservation. He laughed. He actually laughed and said he forgot her name was on the room, then asked me to remove it. The coldness was jarring. Sir, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just to be clear, the woman you met at the bar tonight was with you at check-in hours ago and was given keys then. But now she is not allowed in the room? I could hear him laughing to his friends in the background. Ah. Guys. I confused the poor girl. He mocked. Before getting back on the phone. Yeah. Sweetheart. She's banned from the room. Don't worry about the other details. Just take her name off. I see. I replied, my suspicion hardening into anger. Then, if she isn't going to be on the room anymore, would you like us to call the police and have her removed from the property? There was a slight pause. Whoa. That's too far, he said. The laughter suddenly gone. Don't worry. She'll get the hint soon enough. He hung up. And I knew this was bad. I told Marcus to hold off on doing anything. That I was sticking around to see what happened next. A short while later, Clara came down from the elevators. Tears streaming down her face as she sobbed into her phone. She sank into a chair in our lobby. And Marcus and I did our best to look busy while shamelessly eavesdropping. She was on the phone with her mom and sister. Her voice choked with anguish. Through her sobs, we pieced together the whole ugly story. She had been invited to spend the week with her boyfriend, Leo, to meet his old college buddies. That night, they all went out for dinner and drinks. Clara went to the restroom. And when she returned, she found Leo hitting on another woman. His friends had apparently bet him that he wouldn't do it. When she confronted him, furious and hurt, he exploded. He called her a string of horrible names, humiliating her in front of the entire bar while his friends joined in, mocking her. He threw it in her face that she was nothing without him and dumped her on the spot. Then, he and his friends just left, taking an Uber back and leaving her stranded with no money and no way to get back to the hotel. She had to use her phone's GPS to walk the 2 miles back, barefoot, because her heels were impossible to walk in. Now, he wouldn't even let her into the room to get her luggage or her wallet. My heart absolutely shattered for her. I felt sick. I had helped that monster treat this poor woman like garbage. And now he was upstairs laughing with his friends while she sat in our lobby with nothing. I grabbed a bottle of water from our snack area and brought it to her. I told her I couldn't help but overhear and that I was so sorry for what she was going through. I then laid out her options. I told her that since he was preventing her from accessing her belongings, we could call the police to force him to hand them over. Or, if her family wanted to pay for a new room for her, we would give her a deeply discounted rate in a room far away from him. She thanked me, her hands trembling as she took the water. We talked through her options. And eventually, she decided to get her own room for the night and figure things out in the morning. As we walked to the desk, she asked me to try running her credit card to see if there was enough for another room. Another room? I asked. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She told me she was the one paying for the room Leo was currently in. His name was on the reservation because he booked it. But it was her credit card that was covering everything. This changed everything. I asked why she was paying. And she explained that she was the one with a job. Not him. He hadn't found work in his field since graduating and was living off his parents' money. But shortly after they started dating, his parents cut him off. So he'd been living off her salary ever since. This was a classic case of what one commenter would later call out That the bros before hoes rule doesn't apply when she is the one paying for your life. This is what revealed Leo's greatest fatal flaw, his blinding arrogance. The belief that he was untouchable and that the woman he was using had no power of her own. It was a miscalculation that would ultimately seal his fate. Suddenly, his 180-degree personality shift since meeting up with his friends made perfect, sickening sense. I wanted to tell her he was obviously using her and would probably try to crawl back later. But I held my tongue. Instead, I offered her something much better, a sweet piece of revenge. I informed her that since she was the one paying for the room, if she could verify her identity and the card on file, she had every right to kick him out and keep the room for herself. But I decided to up the ante. I told her that given how horrific her night had been, if she could prove she was the payer, I would upgrade her to the largest, most luxurious suite our hotel offered. Full amenity access. The works. I'd even have Marcus send up a bottle of champagne and fresh strawberries. All completely free of charge. She was stunned by the offer. And for a moment, I saw hesitation in her eyes. Like she was about to decline. So I added the final, crucial detail. Since you'd be upgrading, I said carefully, that would require us to move your things from the current room into the new one. This means the room he's in would need to be vacated immediately. If anyone were to remain in that room after we demand it be vacated, we would be required to have them escorted off the property by the authorities. Or they could pay for the room themselves. Their choice. A flicker of defiance ignited in her tear-filled eyes. She pulled up her banking app, which conveniently had a profile photo of her. Her full name, the full card number, and the pending charge from our hotel. Does this work? She asked. It was more than good enough for me. I flew into action. I upgraded her in the system and moved everything over. Before I could even ask, Marcus was already grabbing a set of master keys and a luggage cart, asking Clara what her bags looked like. He was going to retrieve them himself so she wouldn't have to face Leo again. A small, genuine smile finally broke through her tears. I made her new keys and sent her on her way to her new suite. The second she was on the elevator, the front desk phone rang. It was Leo. And he was furious, demanding to know why my coworker was in his room taking Clara's things. I calmly explained that I couldn't disclose the private information of other guests, and that if he wished to remain in his room, he would need to provide a new method of payment, as the one on file was no longer valid. He absolutely blew up. He was screaming at me. And in the background, I could hear him yelling at Marcus, who was clearly ignoring him. I could even hear his friends telling him to just calm down and pay for the room. I cut through his tirade. Sir, we will give you a courtesy of 10 minutes to make a decision, I said. At which point, if payment is not ready, you must vacate the building, or we will call the authorities and have you evicted. He screamed, swore, and threatened me for another solid minute. You have 9 minutes remaining, I said sweetly. Have you come to a decision? He hung up. 9 minutes later, I called the room. No answer. I called again. Nothing. The third time, he picked up and immediately slammed the phone down. That was all I needed. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I explained the situation, and we all went up to the room together. The sight of the cops made Leo and his friends go white as ghosts. The officers calmly explained that they were being evicted. Leo started trying to plead with me. But an officer stepped in, telling him to only speak to them. His friends, now desperate, offered to pay for the room. The officers looked at me, asking if that would be acceptable. At that moment, the choice was no longer about money. It was about principle. Accepting their payment would have validated Leo's behavior. The refusal was a final, undeniable statement that his actions had consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. I smiled sweetly and said, "No." The cops nodded and began rushing the men to grab their things. Leo was the last one out, grumbling as he had to carry his own bags without a luggage cart. His friends all shot him looks that could kill. This was the karma people like him wait years for. As I escorted them out with the officers, I ran into Marcus in the lobby. He waited until the coast was clear before telling me Clara was in her new room and loved it, though she had declined the champagne, wanting only to sleep. I never saw her again. But Leo did try to harass us with complaint calls and fake bad reviews online. But it was all worth it. Just to know that, for one night, I helped deliver the perfect 5-star revenge. This story is a powerful reminder that how you treat people, especially those who support you, matters. True power isn't about arrogance or who has the loudest voice, but about who holds the cards, or in this case, the credit card. What would you have done in my position? And have you ever witnessed someone's own terrible behavior lead directly to their public downfall?